Rejection hurts. It can make you feel ignored, unwanted, and small. But high-value men see rejection differently. They don't beg, they don't chase, and they definitely don't lose control. Instead, they use rejection as fuel. In this video, you'll learn 5 simple ways high-value men handle rejection without losing their confidence, dignity, or peace of mind. Watch until the end, because the last lesson changes everything. Before we begin, comment, "I am the prize," making it a powerful declaration to your self-respect. Number 1. They stay calm. Nothing confuses a woman more than a man who refuses to lose himself emotionally after she changes her behavior toward him, because many women expect emotional reactions the moment they become distant, cold, inconsistent, disrespectful, or hard to read. And the painful truth many men slowly discover is that emotional control is one of the biggest tests life places in front of them, because the average man immediately panics once attention disappears. He starts checking his phone constantly, overthinking every interaction, rereading old conversations, watching her online activity, questioning his value, and mentally collapsing over someone who is perfectly comfortable sleeping peacefully while he destroys his own peace from the inside. And this reality hurts because many men invest genuine loyalty, care, effort, patience, and emotional energy into women who slowly become careless once they realize they hold emotional power over them. And instead of accepting this reality calmly, many men become emotional prisoners inside their own minds because they keep searching for answers from women who already emotionally checked out long ago. And this is exactly why emotional discipline changes a man's life completely, because the moment he learns to stay calm under emotional pressure, he immediately separates himself from emotionally weak men who allow women to control their state of mind entirely. And staying calm does not mean pretending not to care. It means refusing to abandon your dignity just because someone else changes their behavior toward you. It means understanding that your emotions should never become controlled by another person's inconsistency. And once a man truly understands this principle, he begins moving differently, because now, instead of reacting impulsively every time she becomes distant, he pauses and observes. He watches actions instead of listening blindly to words. He stops trying to force clarity from people who benefit from keeping him confused, and he starts understanding a difficult truth many men avoid for years. Confusion itself is often the answer, because genuine interest rarely creates emotional chaos, mixed signals, and constant uncertainty. And this realization becomes deeply freeing because he finally stops exhausting himself, trying to decode women who clearly lack consistency, maturity, or genuine desire. And this is where Stoic principles become life-changing, because they teach a man to separate external events from internal peace, meaning he stops allowing people to emotionally drag him into anxiety, insecurity, or desperation every time circumstances shift unexpectedly. And many men need this lesson badly, because they spend years emotionally reacting to everything women do instead of mastering themselves internally. They allow delayed replies to ruin their mood, They allow female validation to determine their confidence. They allow attention to become emotional oxygen, and this dependency slowly destroys their self-respect, because no man remains strong while emotionally chained to external approval. And the terrifying part is that many women instinctively sense emotional dependency immediately, because emotionally unstable behavior always reveals itself through over-pursuing, jealousy, emotional outbursts, neediness, insecurity, and constant demands for reassurance, which is why calmness becomes such a powerful advantage, because calmness signals strength, emotional maturity, self-control, and inner stability. And even if she walks away completely, the disciplined man refuses to collapse internally, because his entire identity no longer revolves around being chosen by one woman. He chooses himself first, and this shift transforms every area of his life, because now he handles disappointment differently, stress differently, conflict differently, and uncertainty differently. He no longer acts from emotional panic, but from clarity, patience, and self-respect. And over time, this emotional steadiness creates a presence that people naturally respect, because calm men become difficult to manipulate emotionally. They become grounded in themselves instead of dependent on external comfort. And the greatest part of this transformation is that peace finally returns to his life, because he stops fighting reality, stops chasing explanations, stops forcing outcomes, and starts understanding that true strength begins the moment a man learns to remain emotionally composed in situations designed to break him internally. Number 2, they focus on themselves. When she stops choosing you, replying to you, prioritizing you, or showing interest in you, the strongest response is not revenge, emotional breakdowns, bitterness, or desperate attempts to win her back. The strongest response is rebuilding yourself so powerfully that your entire life changes direction. Because many men waste years mentally trapped inside situationships, failed relationships, mixed signals, and women who clearly do not value them equally. And while their mind stays obsessed with her behavior, their body becomes weaker, their discipline disappears, their finances stagnate, their purpose fades, and their confidence slowly dies in silence, which is why high-value men redirect pain into self-development instead of self-destruction, because they finally realize that obsession with women often distracts men from building the life they truly want. And this realization hits hard because deep down, many men know they abandoned themselves while trying to gain affection from women who were never fully invested in the first place. They stopped training consistently, stopped reading, stopped chasing goals, stopped developing skills, stopped connecting with their purpose, all because their emotional state became dependent on female attention. And once a man recognizes this pattern honestly, without excuses, his entire mindset starts shifting, because he understands that attention from women is temporary, but self-respect lasts far longer. And suddenly he stops making women the center of his existence, not because he hates women, but because he finally values himself enough to stop living in emotional survival mode every time one becomes distant. And this is where Stoic principles become life-changing, because they teach a man to place his energy only into what he can control: his habits, his body, his routines, his discipline, his thoughts, his mission. And instead of wasting hours checking her social media, replaying conversations, wondering who she is with, or hoping she changes her mind, he starts investing that energy into becoming stronger physically, mentally, financially, and spiritually. And slowly, something incredible happens, because the same pain that once destroyed his confidence now sharpens his focus. He wakes up earlier, trains harder, speaks less, thinks deeper, and starts carrying himself differently, because suffering either weakens a man or refines him, depending on how he responds to it. And once self-improvement becomes his priority, he notices something uncomfortable but freeing. Many women are attracted to men who are deeply committed to their purpose, yet many men abandon their purpose trying to impress women, which creates a cycle of weakness and dependency. And this is why emotionally disciplined men often stand out, because they no longer chase validation obsessively. They become consumed by growth instead. And as this transformation continues, the desperation disappears from his eyes, the neediness disappears from his behavior, and his entire presence becomes calmer and more powerful, because he no longer wakes up needing attention to feel valuable. He creates value through discipline, purpose, and action, and even if she never returns, his life still improves dramatically, which is the true victory, because now his confidence is no longer built on unstable external approval. It is built on daily progress, self-control, resilience, and the quiet knowledge that he refused to let disappointment destroy his future. That is exactly why the Stoic relationship blueprint exists, because too many men spend years trapped in emotional confusion, constantly asking themselves why they keep attracting painful situations, why they lose themselves in relationships, why they struggle to stay emotionally strong, and why peace always seems temporary. Which is why this book is filled with timeless Stoic principles designed to completely transform the way you think, act, and carry yourself as a man in today's world. The audiobook version is now finally available through the link in the comments, which means you can listen to this life-changing knowledge while walking alone at night, training in the gym, driving, jogging, working, or sitting quietly rebuilding your mindset one lesson at a time. This is not temporary motivation you forget after one video. This becomes yours forever, giving you permanent access to wisdom, discipline, emotional strength, and clarity that you can return to any time life tries to break your focus, your confidence, or your peace again. Number 3. They do not chase. The fastest way to destroy your value in a woman's eyes is to chase someone who already decided to treat you like an option, because the moment a man starts over-explaining himself, double texting, begging for clarity, trying to force conversations, asking why she changed, asking why she became distant, or trying to convince her to care again, he slowly loses something far more important than her attention. He loses his dignity. And deep down, many men silently suffer through this exact cycle, because they become emotionally addicted to uncertainty. They stare at their phones hoping for replies. They replay old conversations in their heads, trying to understand where her energy shifted. They torture themselves, watching her become excited around other people while acting cold toward them. And the painful truth is that many women fully understand the emotional control they have over men who become attached too quickly, because attention is power, and many men hand over that power freely without realizing it. And instead of accepting her behavior for what it is, they create excuses for her. They tell themselves she is confused, busy, stressed, overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, healing, scared, or not ready, while ignoring the obvious reality standing directly in front of them. Because if a woman truly values a man, she does not consistently create confusion, distance, emotional inconsistency, and anxiety around his presence. And this realization hurts because it forces a man to stop lying to himself and finally see situations clearly instead of emotionally. And that clarity changes everything, because once a man accepts reality without trying to manipulate reality, he finally regains control over himself. And this is where stoic discipline becomes life-changing, because instead of trying to control her emotions, her decisions, her attention, or her loyalty, he focuses entirely on controlling his own actions, thoughts, impulses, and emotional reactions. And suddenly, he stops humiliating himself for temporary affection, because he realizes that chasing someone who willingly distances themselves only deepens emotional suffering. And many men need to hear this brutally honestly. If she wants to leave, let her leave. If she wants distance, give her distance. If she acts uninterested, believe her actions instead of chasing potential, because self-respect begins where desperation ends. And once a man fully understands this principle, he starts walking differently through life, because now he no longer believes his worth depends on convincing someone to stay. And this mindset immediately separates him from emotionally weak men who collapse every time a woman withdraws attention from them, because calm detachment is powerful, silence is powerful, discipline is powerful, and the ability to walk away from disrespect without emotional chaos is one of the rarest forms of masculine strength left today. And ironically, the less emotionally dependent a man becomes, the more attractive his presence naturally feels, because he no longer carries anxious energy, needy behavior, or desperation in his interactions. He becomes centered, grounded, and emotionally stable. And even if she never comes back, his peace remains intact, because his identity is no longer attached to someone else's inconsistent behavior. And this is where true freedom begins, because a man who no longer chases people suddenly has the energy to chase purpose, discipline, growth, peace, and greatness instead. And that transformation changes his entire life from the inside out. Number 4, they keep their standards. Nothing destroys a man faster than abandoning his standards, just because he is afraid of losing a woman. Because the moment fear controls his decisions, he starts accepting behavior that slowly poisons his peace. He tolerates disrespect, mixed signals, emotional games, dishonesty, manipulation, lack of effort, and cold treatment simply because he becomes terrified of being alone. And this is exactly how many men lose themselves in relationships, because instead of standing firm on their values, they slowly shape their entire personality around keeping her happy, even while she gives less effort, less respect, less loyalty, and less emotional consistency over time. And deep down, many men know the painful feeling of staying loyal to women who continuously drain them emotionally while giving the bare minimum in return, because they keep hoping things will return to how they once were. They keep remembering the early attention, the early affection, the early excitement, while ignoring the painful reality of what the relationship becomes in the present. And this emotional attachment blinds them from seeing that standards are not about controlling women. They are about protecting your own peace, dignity, and self-respect. And once a man loses his standards, he starts tolerating things that destroy him internally. He accepts being ignored, disrespected, manipulated, emotionally neglected, and treated like a backup option. And the saddest part is that many women lose respect for men who tolerate everything, because tolerance without boundaries signals weakness instead of strength. And this truth makes many men uncomfortable because they are taught that unconditional acceptance makes them good partners. But without standards, a man becomes emotionally available to people who do not deserve access to him, and Stoic thinking completely changes this mindset, because it teaches a man to separate emotional attachment from rational judgment, meaning he stops allowing emotions to override reality, and instead of asking himself how much pain he can tolerate to keep her, he starts asking whether her behavior aligns with the type of life he wants to build. And this shift is powerful because now he stops rewarding disrespect with endless patience. He stops making excuses for poor treatment, and he starts understanding that peace is more valuable than temporary companionship. And many men finally begin transforming once they accept a difficult truth. Loneliness is painful, but staying attached to someone who continuously damages your self-worth is far worse, because at least loneliness gives a man space to rebuild himself, while toxic attachment slowly empties him emotionally until he barely recognizes himself anymore. And this is why disciplined men walk away from situations that constantly drain their mental peace, because they understand that standards are not arrogance. Standards are self-respect in action. And once a man truly embraces this principle, he stops begging to be valued. He stops shrinking himself to avoid losing women, and he stops sacrificing his dignity just to maintain relationships built on inconsistency and emotional imbalance. And over time, his entire energy changes, because now he carries quiet confidence rooted in self-respect instead of fear. And women notice this instantly, because emotionally grounded men are rare, especially in a world where many men compromise their values for validation, attention, or temporary affection. And this transformation becomes deeply empowering, because for the first time in a long time, he no longer abandons himself trying to keep someone else around. He chooses peace over chaos, dignity over desperation, and standards over emotional slavery. Number 5. They turn pain into growth. Nothing awakens a man faster than emotional pain, because pain forces introspection in ways comfort never can. And many men spend years distracted, unfocused, emotionally asleep, and dependent on external validation, until one painful experience completely shakes their identity and forces them to confront the truth about themselves, their habits, their weaknesses, their desperation, their lack of discipline, and the dangerous reality that they built their happiness around people who could walk away at any moment. And while some men allow these experiences to destroy them completely, high-value men use pain as fuel to rebuild themselves stronger than before, because they understand that suffering can either sharpen a man or break him, depending entirely on how he responds to it. And this realization changes everything, because instead of wasting months drowning in bitterness, stalking her life, comparing themselves to other men, or obsessing over what she is doing without them, they redirect that emotional energy towards self-mastery, discipline, purpose, physical improvement, financial growth, and emotional control. And this process is deeply transformative, because for the first time they stop running away from themselves and start confronting themselves honestly. They begin recognizing patterns they ignored for years. They notice how emotionally dependent they became, how much validation they constantly needed, how quickly they abandoned their routines once a woman entered their life, and how much of their identity revolved around female approval instead of genuine self-respect. And these realizations hurt deeply, because they expose uncomfortable truths many men spend their entire lives avoiding. But this discomfort becomes the beginning of growth, because Stoic discipline teaches a man to stop viewing suffering as punishment and start viewing it as training. And once he applies this principle consistently, pain stops becoming something that controls him emotionally and starts becoming something that strengthens him mentally, physically, and spiritually. And over time, his entire lifestyle begins changing, because now he trains with purpose, works with focus, thinks with clarity, and moves through life with greater emotional awareness. And the same experiences that once shattered his confidence now become the foundation of his strength, because he finally understands that emotional resilience is built through adversity, not comfort. And this transformation becomes visible in every part of his life, because he no longer seeks constant validation. He no longer panics when people leave, and he no longer sacrifices his peace chasing temporary affection. And ironically, this version of him often becomes far more attractive naturally, because confidence built through struggle carries a different energy entirely. It feels grounded, disciplined, calm, and emotionally secure. And many men reach a point where they even become grateful for the painful experiences that once nearly broke them, because those experiences forced them to evolve into someone stronger, wiser, calmer, and more self-aware than they ever would have become otherwise. And this is why emotionally disciplined men eventually stop seeing painful situations as endings and start seeing them as redirections toward a better version of themselves. Because every difficult experience either becomes an excuse for weakness or a reason to transform completely. And the men who choose transformation often build the strongest lives in the long run, because they stop depending on people for their happiness and start creating inner strength that cannot easily be shaken by anyone. Too many men spend their entire lives emotionally controlled, distracted, manipulated, and spiritually weak because nobody teaches them how to think clearly, protect their peace, and master themselves. Which is exactly why the Stoic relationship blueprint for men is changing lives through timeless Stoic principles that instantly sharpen your mindset, strengthen your discipline, and help you finally reclaim control over your emotions, relationships, and future. And the audiobook version is now available through the link in the comments, so you can absorb this life-changing wisdom while walking alone, training, driving, jogging, or rebuilding yourself in silence while the rest of the world stays asleep. Comment, "I reclaim my power," if you are ready to stop wasting years chasing confusion and start transforming into the man you know you are capable of becoming. Then like this video and subscribe to help more men discover these truths before they lose themselves trying to gain validation from people who never deserved that power over them in the first place. I'm also currently building the full Stoic Relationship Blueprint course, launching in the next few weeks. And once it drops, it will take this transformation even deeper for the men who are truly serious about mastering themselves and escaping the emotional weakness society quietly trains them to accept as normal.